Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the show.
That's right. All right. So we haven't had a show since the end of April, and that's been due to the fact that I became a semi-world traveler. My wife and I spent the last 2 weeks in Japan and Korea. Um, Under the excuse that it was a pre 40th wedding anniversary trip. And we hadn't taken a trip this big since 10 years ago when we did a cruise, Mediterranean cruise. So we were long overdue for a big trip. Um, but we got to see some family, and I think that was really what my wife wanted to do, plus some shopping and things like that. I let's say so. I haven't been to Japan and Korea for about 20 years. More so, I think I think Korea was the last time I was 20 years since I visited Korea. May have been another year or two before I visited. Add on to that for my last trip to Japan. Um, but as I get older, my memories of exactly what happened back then are pretty fuzzy. Uh, but like the world, Seoul, Korea, to me has just gotten even busier in the last 20 years. We weren't in one of the big cities. We weren't in Tokyo when we took a side venture to Japan. We were in a couple other cities that were still. I mean, one was relatively large, the other one much smaller. But there's a pace of life that goes on, and comparing Korea and Japan is kind of interesting. At least we did it kind of from a, I don't know, maybe a hotel amenity shopping standpoint and whatnot, and things like that. And there's the two countries, the people there do live different types of lives. Uh, so I don't know, Brian, you may have seen or heard stories about 7-Eleven in Japan. So, 7-Eleven was a company that was started, in America, came out of Texas,
Yeah, Dallas area.
right? The Southland Corporation, I think may have had a previous name to that. Uh, they licensed, I think, the 7-Eleven name to a company in Japan, and eventually the Japanese company bought out the American company. Um, so they're now Seven and I Holdings, I think it was. Anyway, so they're huge. And in Japan, it's not like your 7-Elevens here at all, And I don't go to some. I don't remember last time I stepped in a 7-Eleven here in America. Um, but I
You coach AAU, you will find yourself in a 7-Eleven because no
yeah,
one's open and you need a sandwich.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think really, if I have to go back, I think it would have been, I mean, I don't even do the Slurpee Day thing, the free Slurpee Day, because I'm not all that crazy about Slurpees. Not like I was when I was a kid. But I think after we had kind of church basketball practice, uh, you know, probably the last time I did that was like 2011. So I may have stepped foot in a 7-Eleven since then. I know I visited the outside of a 7-Eleven when the Red Box was still in force, and I would go rent a DVD. But generally, going in to buy anything in a 7-Eleven, I just don't do it here. But in Japan, it really is an experience of food. I'd heard so much about uh, the kind of food offerings that they had, the prepared food, and so they have huge sections of this, and the Japanese apparently love this stuff. So
Hey, Don, did you call me?
the I don't know. So somebody calls me and then he calls me back. Oh, what's going on here? Dwight, what are you doing? So anyway, so they have all these food offerings, and so you can you go there even at night. They do a pretty good job of keeping it stocked, uh, so that
So,
if you
like, is this food I would recognize, or is this like
yeah,
sushi?
yeah. I mean
Right?
sushi type of things. They
Are there
have
sandwiches?
sandwiches. Yep, those sandwiches are probably some of the sandwiches might be a little bit more geared towards some of the Japanese things. I, I think Japanese and Koreans, they like kind of like egg salad. And so you find lots of egg salad sandwiches or variations of that, in the 7-Eleven there.
Okay.
But so 7-Eleven is kind of the king, but there's also an outfit called Family Mart and another one called Lawson's. And they're basically all competing with each other for the same, dollar, same yen, and the kind of thing like that. So they have this wide variety of offerings in there, and so it's pretty good. I mean, we fed ourselves cheap breakfast that way. It was just easy to grab and go and just grab, for some things, rather than, the hotel we were in Fukuoka, the buffet, I think it was like $50 a person. I'm like, I'm not going to eat $50 worth of food. So it's like, forget about that. So, it was much cheaper to grab something, at a 7-Eleven or a Lawson's or whatever. We got semi hooked. I hate to admit some of the things I got hooked on there, which I don't know that I'll have to worry about here. But 7-Eleven and Lawson's both had chocolate eclairs, and they were, I don't know, they were like $2 a piece. They weren't huge, but I don't find them very often in bakeries here. So it's like, yeah, and my wife loves that custard filling.
Mhm.
So I mean, talk about tempting someone. That was just every day I could find one to buy one. This was the ultimate temptation. And this is from a person who spent a week or 10 days before we left trying to exercise a little bit, drop a little bit of weight, only to find ourselves just, pigging out big time on stuff we shouldn't be eating in the morning. And then the food in Japan, the food in Korea is great, and it's not terribly expensive when you go to the restaurants. It's a no tipping culture. So whatever price you see is basically the price you pay. I think maybe plus maybe a 10% tax or whatever. I'm not sure I don't know if they tax the restaurant food in Korea, but I think they do in Japan. Uh, but there's a lot of there's also a lot of self-service type of stuff that you kind of got to get your own. We had one place over in Korea where it was in the tunnel area from the hotel leading to the subway. Not very expensive, but the table set up so that all your utensils are basically in a drawer, and so you pull open the drawer and you have chopsticks and spoon, and I think wet naps or whatever, and things like that. And for me, the non-chopsticks guy, I had to go find where the fork was. But we were serving ourselves. We had to go get our own water, stuff like that. They don't have any wait staff or whatever. You order the food on a kiosk, you pick it up, you eat it, you put it back on the tray, you put it back in the return section. I thought, well, that's a pretty efficient operation. That means the only help they really truly need is kitchen staff, and they'll clean the tables later, unless the people coming in just kind of wipe off the tables. They have like, wipes that you can wipe down the table if somebody left it kind of messy and stuff like that. But so I kept, my dread was like, we ate so much food, and I splurged, and we went business class all the way. And so we had food on the plane, like 3 meals on the plane, each way. We had food in the lounges, which we had to test out the food in the lounges, right? So it's kind of like one thing led to another, and I'm like, do I really want to get on the scale? And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm kind of wide awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, which is never the case. And I got on the scale, and I was like, oh, I'm only 5 pounds up. I went to bed. 4 hours later, okay, I'm going to weigh myself again. I was now up 2.5. I was like, somehow I lost 2.5 pounds in that last 4 hours. Don't know what happened there. But now I'm about 2 pounds heavier than when I left. So I think that's a victory for me. Anyway,
It sounds like one time years ago, is that there was a famous sports writer down in Louisiana, and he moved to Columbia, Missouri, and he went outside the newspaper office to feed a cat one night, and these guys killed him. They murdered him in the parking lot of the newspaper. And so when he died, they said, anybody knows him, you want to contribute stories about him because he was quite a character. Send them here. So the story I sent was one day we were covering the Saints, and I was a sports writer, and we ended up eating 9 meals that day because there was like the hotel had breakfast, the Saints had something before the game, the Saints had something at halftime, the Saints had something after the game, and then somebody fed us in New Orleans before we could leave, and by the time we made it back to Shreveport, we'd eaten 9 times, and it's like you feel today, and the next day that's a mistake. And of course, this guy was like 6'4", 270, so he didn't care. It didn't bug him at all. But that was our story, and people in Shreveport will know I'm talking about Kent Heitholt. And if you can see that there's 2 documentaries out about his murder, and the 2 guys who did it, one of them managed to get out. He convinced the courts or whoever to let him out, and the other one's still in prison for it. And he claims, I was just there, but I didn't really, and I don't know, but all their stories sound spish to me.
I don't know that all those meals. It sounds like you were in training for football or something like that.
Yeah, it was really.
You got a calorie load and
yeah, that's right. Ride the Tour de France or something.
Yeah,
try to work it all off.
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I, as we kind of look back on it, we thought, well, even though I couldn't get to the gym, they had the hotel in Seoul had a fitness center, but when we arrived, I was tired, and I was still kind of tired the next day when we were doing some things. Hotels in Japan didn't have fitness centers that we were in, so I couldn't do that. But I did finish off, and when we went back to Seoul with just doing some of my exercise routine. But we did a fair amount of walking, on some sightseeing and some things like that. And we thought, well, maybe that helped a lot to kind of offset some of the stuff that we were eating and things like that. And, when you go to a foreign country, even though you've been there before, but it's been a while, you go to these stores, whether it's a grocery store, the 7-Eleven or whatever, and you say, oh, look at this. This is so interesting. I've got to try this. And my wife is good. She knows, her Asian food, the things that she was looking for to bring back home. Now, we brought a lot of stuff because we were going to give some stuff to people, her relatives, et cetera, and things like that. So, and stuff. But she also made sure we had a lot of suitcases that she could fill with things she wanted to bring back, which was mostly foodstuffs that are hard to find here, or sometimes are just more expensive here because they're Asian food, transportation, costs and things like that. But yeah, I go through the store and I'm like, oh, well, this looks kind of interesting. If they had an English translation of it, then it gave me an idea. Not everything on the shelf, they put an English translation in there, so you're like not really sure what's in there in the packaging. But so I'd skip most of those. But we picked up a few things, probably much to my detriment here coming up. But just the amount of stuff that she brought back was just incredible overall. But it was good. The weather was pretty good overall. It rained sometimes, but Korea and Japan have got great subway and train systems. I probably give Korea because of this. I don't know if it's because it's the compactness of it, and how Korea decided to do things. But it's bus, it's subway, and it's rail and taxi, and there are people who do own cars. But we spent some time with my cousin's daughter, and they've been there for 4 years, and she said, we didn't think we'd be here this long, so we thought we didn't need a car. She just had her 7th child, and yeah, I mean that's a lot of kids in Korea. There's really not an apartment big enough to hold that many people until they're basically everybody's the one boy, they just had a baby, but the one boy's in one room, and basically all the other girls, which are 5 girls, basically are sharing the other room. And then the parents have a room, and it's like, wow, okay, they're getting great experiences about being overseas because they get to travel to Japan or whatever. It's pretty easy, but they get around. I mean, they can take the subway or take a taxi to go to church. It's about 10 minutes away by taxi, and they just do that, and it's just they don't even think about it because it's relatively inexpensive to do that. And stuff like that. So where they live downstairs is basically a mall. There's a bunch of stores, including what's called Home Plus, which is kind of like a Walmart, for Korea. So there's just stuff all around everywhere you go, and things like that. I don't know. It's hard to describe some of the things there. I mean, I had my wife's uncle and aunt and cousin, but it was really the uncle that was paying for it, I guess, took us out to a beef place. And I haven't seen a place like this before because, in essence, and so there's a thing called Hanwoo beef, and it's like Japanese are known for Kobe beef and for the taste of Kobe beef. And this place basically had like a butcher shop and then the restaurant. And you walk in and you go to the butcher shop part of it, and you pick your meat cuts or something. There was already packaged. You pick what meat you want to cook, and then you bring it to the table, and then you cook your meat that way, rather than having you say. Most Korean restaurants was like, you order, you say, I want bulgogi or what, I want this, and this, and they bring it to you. But this way, you actually get to see your meat and say, select it. I want this, and you choose the meat you want to eat. And it was really good. I mean, it was very tasty and everything like that. We even finished off, Young and I, we hated the local restaurant. Nothing special about it, but it's very traditional. And first time I'd seen wood charcoal, and my wife says that is the traditional Korean way of cooking, is using wood charcoal to cook the food, and it was good. I think it actually enhances the flavor. So it's an experience. Maybe I will go back again. I don't know. I thought this is kind of my big thing, and whatever. But anyway, so it was quite a trip. And I come home but in the morning, I look at my lawn. You guys must have had a ton of rain though in the 2 weeks or something like that.
Rain most of the time.
Yeah, because I came home. I mean, we had just had the grass cut on the 3rd of May, and I come home and the grass is like this, and I'm like, great. And I can't get the lawn guy to come by until Saturday.
Yeah, and it may not be dry by then.
Yeah, well,
rain for a while.
Yeah, I mean, my wife has forced me into retirement from cutting my own grass, but I don't want to cut grass that high anyway with the regular lawnmower. I'd rather have the lawn service guys with their big lawnmowers, because they'll do it in 20 minutes. But yeah, it's just like, what the heck happened? I haven't seen my grass grow like that in ages.
Yeah, it was a cool, wet end of the month, and about to be even cooler and wetter.
Yeah, well, so
really
I guess
cold tonight, tomorrow night.
I guess I traveled roughly at a good time for all of that.
Yeah.
All right. Enough of my travel log and boring people to death or whatever. Stuff that I've been trying to catch up a little bit to what's been going on. My life is a blur. I see that there's reports that Israel might strike Iran. Is that something that they probably are going to check with Washington first before they take any such big action? I guess. What's the theory behind this? Or
I mean they've said Israel was going to strike Iran about 15 times in the last 2 years. It hasn't happened yet. I think that they're getting to the point that I guess the Houthis shot some missiles that came close to hitting them or whatever, and so that's they want to pay them back for that, right? Let them know that doesn't go unanswered. But I don't think I don't think we're imminent for an Israel-Iran war.
Yeah, I mean, does Israel really want to do that anyway? I mean,
it's hard to bring closure to Hamas and all that stuff unless you cut off the funding stream. So, I mean, and that what they want is Iran out of their hair, one way or the other. If Iran's willing to do that without getting bombed, they're willing to do that.
All right, and I think I saw a report that the last known living hostage has been returned.
That's correct.
All right. So I didn't have
American hostage.
American hostage. Okay. Right. So I don't know what's left in hostages?
Some Israelis.
We still have some Israelis that they think are alive.
40 or 50 that aren't accounted for. Yeah.
Yeah. But they don't know if, I mean, not a lot of them are probably alive at this stage. We're guessing, I guess.
I wouldn't guess. I wouldn't think.
Yeah. So, all right. That's, yeah, but something to always keep an eye on. Update me a little bit. I know there's been, Trump has been trying to get something done here with Putin. Is Trump getting frustrated with Putin? Has he gotten any more frustrated with Putin over the last?
Well, I mean, the Russians play games with this stuff, right? They always have. So Trump says we're making progress, and Putin will say we made no progress, right? They had the same conversation, and but it's just like he's not going to let Trump just say I am settling this issue, right? He's going to throw sand in the gears, and that's what he does. That's what he's doing, but they are marching toward success on this. It's not here yet. It may not be here anytime soon, but it won't be too long.
It'll be good to figure this out one way or the other.
I think it'll get figured out relatively soon, and on terms that most people. I mean, given the fact that Russia indeed controls what it controls, about a third of the country. It's hard to dictate terms too harshly to the Russians because they're the ones, as Trump says, they're the ones with the cards. So, I think you will see some resolution on that coming pretty quickly, though. There's a lot of energy toward it. I think the Ukrainians realize that their dreams of winning this are not going to come true. I think that's one of the big developments of the last 2 or 3 weeks is that Zelensky has sort of slid from, I'm holding out for victory to, where do we get off this train? So,
and on the tariff front, I mean, it seems to be a lot of progress while I was gone.
Yeah,
as well.
It's like everybody wanted to make I think China has made the outlines of a deal. The left is coming. There was no deal. They have no deal. They haven't signed anything. Of course not. They haven't. It's like here's the parameters of the deal. You deal, people go work out all this stuff, call us when you're ready, right? That's the way all these things work. And so that's what has happened, and they're working it out with China. I think our Treasury Secretary is pretty good. He gets these people to understand where their interests lie. So, I expect to see something more formal, or if not something more formal, a situation where China quietly starts doing the things we want them to do. Not stealing IP from us, not forcing management of companies that operate in China to take Chinese on their management marketing sides and and so that they can learn how to make and sell these products. So then you go back and compete against them, and you get prices from suppliers that only Chinese can access, and they run you out of business. And so I think that the Chinese are going to have to address these concerns from Trump. What people don't understand is, they were at the height of this, right? They were threatening to lay off almost a third of the workforce in China. Okay, so if a third of your people, if you're trying to keep from layoffs of a third of your people, and you already have some unrest from the government not providing the jobs and income and opportunity that people thought they were promised and whatnot. That's massive unrest in a country that may or may not be able to control it. So I think that the Chinese read the tea leaves, so to speak, and have come around to Trump's way of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, as I recall, Trump, even with that 145% tariff that we had before, even Trump said that that was high. And kind of alluded to the fact that, it wouldn't stay that way if the Chinese, were willing to talk. And so we're down to what, 35% or something like that.
Yeah.
Not
the chance it goes lower.
Yeah. I mean, it probably will go lower and probably needs to go lower. But I think, like I've never been a big tariff guy, but I think they've had some positive effect. But it's a tough thing. I mean, they're bringing in some money. A lot of adjustments have had to be made, and we still don't really know where the final tariffs will land. But in the meantime, it has brought people to the table.
Right. See, and that's tariffs are strategic devices, right? And the like left, the libertarian economists are all aghast, right? You hear them all talk about, this is total betrayal of American values and all this stuff. No, it's not. It's another way of doing it. And the other thing is, to the entire libertarian economics movement, you have 40 years, right? From the time of Reagan forward, anytime we got ready to do anything on economic policy, we went to you. What would be good? And how would this pass your various purity tests and so forth? And they gave us nothing. They gave us zippy. They got, I remember walking around and campaigning for Republican congressional candidate in 2006. And people are telling me, you guys have nothing. The country's cratering. The plants are closing. The jobs are leaving. When you talk about, bilateral trade deals with Costa Rica, we don't care about that, right? That makes you feel good. But like, it gives Costa Rica access to our markets. It doesn't give us access to theirs, right? And so that's what was going on in Europe, right? There's a heck of a lot more European cars on U.S. highways than there are American cars on European highways, right? And why is that? Because we allowed unfair trade practices to do this to our auto industry for 40 years. It goes, hey, free trade, free trade, free trade, right? And so free trade was us getting taken advantage of. So now Trump comes along and says, whatever the percentage over there is, that's going to be the percentage over. Oh, that's terrible. That's anti-free trade. You're a commie, and it's like, you had your chance and you didn't do it. You made things worse. So now people who want to make things better are purposely going after it, and they shouldn't be stopped. They should keep going.
Yeah, I mean, at least it was a relief to the markets initially for that they hated the tariffs of what it was potentially going to do to the economy at first from their perspective. So there was a lot
Economy's growing. Economy's doing fine, right?
Yeah.
Inflation's down, gas is down. Jobs are coming back, real jobs. I guess, did you see, you might have missed this, but there was a big report about, they went through the actual results in terms of jobs by the Biden administration, and non-Americans ended up in plus. American citizens ended up in negative. And it would have been a lot worse, but they hired a lot of government workers, right? Biden puffed the employment statistics by hiring a lot of government workers. So that's a lot of who Trump is getting rid of, is people who were hired to make job stats look good.
Yeah, and we'll see how this effect goes forward. I mean, because Liberation Day, was April 2nd. So, all the inflation numbers and things like that are basically the March numbers, I guess, or whatever. The April numbers come in later or whatever. We don't have enough information yet. I think it'll take another month or two to see whether or not how the tariffs have really affected inflation, whether or not inflation ticks back up, how that affects employment and things like that. Yeah, I mean, gas prices. I noticed, here that gas prices have dropped a little bit, not a ton, but they've stabilized. But the prices, even when price of oil was falling, the gas prices were just not following suit by as large a margin numbers I expected to be.
It's starting to now, though. You're starting to see there's a lot of gas stations out there below 3, some even below 280. So it's starting to happen even around here.
Yeah, so that would be good news if it continues in that direction for consumers.
And the fact is, people really don't care how free the economy is if gas and groceries are cheap. That's free enough for them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, so I forgot to put this up as part of my travel log. And I don't know if you can read this thing.
Yes, gee. Wow.
Okay, so
in the One World Lounge, you can't get noodles anymore.
Yeah. So I'm walking around, and it says, as part of our company's ESG policy and environmental commitment, instant noodles will no longer be available in the lounge. Thank you for understanding. So this, the One World Lounge is available when you're flying internationally, or if you've got certain status, I guess. and it's American Airlines is part of it, but I think it's about 10 airlines. Mostly foreign airlines. Because not everybody can have a lounge. It's just not economical. But you band together and you can serve a bunch of customers, which is interesting. Which I thought it was. As you laughed and I chuckled too. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And it's like I was just in the Asiana lounge, like last week, and there was all kinds of ramen, right? It's like you're still in Asia. How do you not have ramen?
Right, that's right.
So and it's like, and I'm like, what is it about ramen that is that's bad,
Environmentally bad?
Yeah. So
how does ramen pollute?
Okay, so Google, Gemini. So they say these different things, palm oil, key ingredient, instant ramen, driver of deforestation, particularly in Southeast Asia, impacting biodiversity, contributing to climate change, packaging, styrofoam cups commonly used in instant ramen are non-biodegradable and contribute to plastic waste, carbon footprint, the overall production, transportation of ramen, including wheat farming, processing, packaging, contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, working conditions, community impact, food security, transparency and accountability, ethical sources, corporate social responsibility, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, so, I mean, is ramen, is ramen that different than a lot of other, can we not say that by a lot of our food that we see in a grocery store, that the
ramen is in those little plastic, little styrofoam cups.
Yeah, they're in the little cups, but I mean, it just seems that you're going after that I guess I don't
get real problems, right?
Yeah,
we got some real problems without worrying about ramen. Whether you can eat ramen.
Is this a first world problem? The one world lounge people is like, nobody. I don't think there's enough people that cared. Right. That they would prefer to just have their ramen. Okay, they didn't really care about this ESG stuff, and I just found it to be pretty laughable that you're in Asia, and the lounge says, well, because of ESG, we're not going to have ramen in our lounge, and I'm like, well, this is one of the dumbest things I've seen. It's like how much is the ESG impact of other things that you serve? I mean, they were serving.
How's ramen that much worse?
Well, I mean, they were serving.
They just want to crusade and pat themselves on the back. It's the same leftist, self-aggrandizing crap we've been dealing with for years.
Yeah, I mean, they were serving pork bulgogi and some other stuff, and it's like, I mean, don't they complain about something with when you butcher a hog and stuff like that, it just seems like it's just such hypocrisy. With regard to that just like you're not gonna have ramen in there. Like for me, I wasn't planning to eat ramen, okay, to begin with. So I didn't really, from that perspective, I didn't care. But as a conservative, I'm like, oh, this has just got to be a joke of some kind, to do that. Maybe maybe they don't have a lot of Asian customers because people are flying maybe to the U.S. or other places. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It is just silly, and all this is. So there's a place that we still need to work on to stamp out this ESG crap. And I'll be looking at this.
We got business with the One World Lounge.
Like, please tell me, please. I want an overall different. In an age where we're seeing ESG, right? DEI, ESG, all these things going bye-bye. These guys are out here. It's like, oh well, we can't serve you ramen because it might cause climate change. Please tell me if the people in the K dramas are worried about eating ramen and and how much it contributes to carbon footprint and the whole ESG thing. It's this could spark a whole other thing. It's like a tax on Netflix because they have a bunch of K dramas and people eating ramen. Where's their corporate responsibility? This is bad.
Yeah, once you go down this road, it gets pretty silly pretty quick.
It does. It really, really does. All right. So here's something that's a little closer to home for me. With President former President Biden being diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I'm shocked at this diagnosis, mainly because, based on I saw a report that they said the last time they screened him was 2014. And I'm thinking, like, wait a minute, the guy's been the vice president and the president of the United States. He has to go, at least while he's the president. I don't know if he does it well. I don't know. They do it while he's vice president, but they have an annual exam, right?
Right. But this stops getting tested for at a certain age, right? And most people. And also, but the thing about it is like every president, they pulled up things on all the other presidents, and every president going back to Bush, the daddy, listed this, the indicator stat that tells you have this cancer, right, on their thing, and Biden's leaves it out. All the other presidents said, here's my score on this test. And Biden left it out, which, and of course, the media, the media has really acquitted itself well on all things Biden, right? They've hidden and distorted and lied and cajoled about his entire political career. And now here they are again, covering up something that they how can you look at that line, and they have their doctors, the media, they have, the networks have doctors and so forth on their staffs that go through these reports and come up with the storylines, right? So how did all those doctors look at all these, 4 for being president, 4 for being vice president, say he never lists that stat? Why does he ever tell us that stat? Why do all these other people give us that stat, but he does not? And if they did notice it, they didn't say anything, right? Because that's not the kind of, what's coming here, what's becoming clear here is the media conspired to hide every negative story about Biden they possibly could, right? They didn't worry about the truth or what the people needed to know, right? You were going to let us elect a guy president for 4 years who was almost certainly going to die of cancer during that time, right? Think about that, because you don't die of cancer in a day, right? You decline over time. So we were going to be sitting there with a president they knew to be mentally unfit for and physically unfit for the job. And then we're going to say anything because they hate Trump and they worried that Trump would get to be president if they didn't. Well, they didn't. They lied, and Trump got to be president anyway, right? And he got to be president because they exposed his lie. But let's face it, the most important thing that happened in all of 2024 was June 27th when Trump debated Biden. And Biden couldn't remember that answer, couldn't answer the question. And Trump said, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't think he does either. That was the election. Everything that came before or after did not matter. That told Americans, yeah, Trump is actually right this time. The other guy is not fit to serve, right? And media pretended otherwise, and then they decided that they should, try to kill him and keep him from taking office, right? But after that, it was a downhill ride.
Yeah, I tread lightly with cancer diagnosis because it's hit my family pretty hard, and I have the same cancer that Biden has, and it just is remarkable that, as I said before, that this is, we just find out about this now. The thing is that the PSA antigen test, it's a blood test. It's and if he gets a complete metabolic panel test, a CMP test, it's very easy for them to pull that number out of all that, because they're basically looking at everything. How's your calcium levels and all these other things that you have there, creatine and all these things. So there's a whole bunch of things that are listed, if you do a CMP, and you pull that out of there, and as you get older, the chances actually increase that you're going to have this. When I went to the doctor, he was saying that 40% or thereabouts of American men actually have the cancer but don't know it, because it is such a slow moving cancer in general that you don't feel the symptoms. And I definitely didn't feel the symptoms. I didn't seem to have the typical symptoms either, and a lot of people have that. Now Biden has spread to the bones. I've had the same issue. it is treatable, but it really depends upon when you catch it. I think his is now a later stage than mine. Manageable, yes. Life expectancy for him, I mean, he's already 82, right?
Right.
So his life, he's probably gonna get a few years shaved off of that with this cancer. But for someone in his position, for them to not watch things like that, when when you know that this, that there's a high preponderance of this in men. I mean, this is the one of the things that it was only going to happen to us, right? You know, so why you don't pick that up? Why you are not showing, watching that closely? If
Yeah.
you
Why are you letting them go to Wilmington every week and not release visitor logs, not get any information about that, and just say, okay, never mind. He deserves his privacy. No, he doesn't. He's the freaking president.
Yeah, well, and I've learned, from this process that, the the marker can jump radically, and it's not it is just an indicator. It is not necessarily the most accurate thing. They will, doctors will say, this is just one way that we tell that there's a possibility of cancer is looking at what the reading is. So when the closer you get to 4, the more serious, they want to look at it. My number was like 56, right? In the group I'm in, it's like there I've seen people say that they reported numbers in the 200s, and stuff like that. Now my numbers are now less than 0.1 because of the medication I'm on. So that's a good sign. And so it can be treated, but when as you age, it also there's a possibility that it will increase. And so as it does, a good doctor, good, physician will watch for that and then say, okay, we need to have a biopsy. We need to do this, so that we would prefer to catch this early because this extends your life. But if they're catching it at stage 4 or later, then you have your choices of how to treat it will become much more limited.
Right. But do you think that they just caught it?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that somebody at the very least dropped the ball here, that somebody was not paying attention. I don't know about how much of a of a cover, but I don't want to get into that because I don't want to there are too many people out there that are saying, oh, there's this huge cover up on this per se. And that needs to be investigated a little bit more. It's like, how did you let this guy, if you're telling me now that it's been 11 years since you tested for it, how in the heck did you do that? I mean, why? I mean,
and why?
It's one thing.
You did test for it, and you do know the results, right?
It's one thing for me who was lackadaisical about getting a physical. Okay, that's my fault. This is on me, but not for that. I mean, every physical I'd ever been to, at least when I was, younger, always included a PSA test, and even if you get older, they still probably should be checking on it at least every few years, just to see if anything's going, because it is, I think it's like the number one killer of men in America, is prostate cancer. So look, Lloyd Austin, right? He's gone through that, right? And I don't think he's doing, his was not very good either. But you begin to wonder about the Biden administration and exactly what they're doing with the medical records of how you
when you put it with all the other things they lied about, right, and hid and shuffled off and whatnot. Like, it's hard to believe that they didn't know about this for a long time and hid it. And there was a conspiracy among. You didn't really have to have a lot of people in this conspiracy, right?
Well, right. I mean, the thing to note too is just that, so prostate cancer can be self-contained. You catch it early enough, it stays within and that's the best result you can get, is like self-contained, because then it's much more treatable. If it starts to go outside the prostate, then you have other potential things of lymph nodes and other issues. People sometimes need a radical prostatectomy that can cause incontinence. And if it goes to the bones, that usually means radiation treatment and some other potential, effects, because it could go from there. I was amazed that, something that starts off as prostate cancer could wind up in your lungs.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that can happen with this, and I don't know. I mean, when you're the president of the United States, at the very least, it's like you have to be looking at everything and all of this, and
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like the Democrats, like, oh, why are we talking about this? He's not even president anymore. Like, well, there's a matter of the auto pen. There's the matter of a bunch of people got pardoned that can't explain it. Right. There's a matter of like, how do you visit this degree of untruth on the American people, right? I mean, these are profound lies. These are earth-shaking lies these people told.
Well, I mean, just coming on the heels of the admissions about Biden's mental decline, this is not good, right? This is not good. And one of the thoughts that obviously crossed my mind, has probably crossed the minds of millions of people, is just like, wow, we were like this close potentially to getting Kamala Harris as president, as a result of maybe Biden dying in office,
right.
Which is a real possibility, because with cancer, you cannot say for sure whether or not, say Biden gets a 5-year prognosis, that, his life expectancy is 5 years. But depending upon how things go, if the treatments don't really take, it could be 2 years,
right.
It could be what
the thing is, like, so, if they get her in office, right, they've already showed you that, like, the figurehead, the person whose name has the seal and all that stuff, is not really, we don't care that whether they actually run the country, right? We're prepared to run it for them, in their name, right? So it would have been Kamala, then the people behind her running it, are even worse than the Biden people, right? They're even farther down the line. So, I mean, they were trying to foist radicals on us through a backdoor method here, right? They knew this would happen, and they're like, hey, if we can get Joe across the finish line again, right? And then we know Joe is A, senile, and B, cancer stricken. We have Kamala as president. It's a way to get Kamala as president without having to vote for her, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Has anybody
which is, I think we all know now, is the only way that will ever happen. She's not going to win an election to be president, right?
Seriously. I haven't been, I was just wondering, does anybody ask for Trump's PSA number? Was that on his report?
It's on Trump listed every year. So
he's still in the safe zone.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So no, this is just, I mean, this, like I said, combined with all these things. I mean, so now, we've got the kind of the Jake Tapper, what's this, Alex Thompson, I guess, was the Axios reporter. So I mean, it's kind of funny because, in a sense, because I think, CNN had Jake on all kinds of shows talking about the book, right?
Right.
This is the real guy. I mean, this is the guy who helped part of the cover up, who is now admitting that he, it's like, we were wrong. And here's the whole night, and he's going to sell a lot of books because of this. It tops it, and there's CNN promoting Tapper in the book, which is basically saying like, oh yeah, by the way, our people have lied, all this time.
That's right.
But we want to help Jake out with his book sales, so we're going to put him out there, and don't try to actually notice the fact that Jake worked for us, and CNN was also equally culpable in a cover-up about Biden's mental decline, and that he should never have run for re-election.
Right. Yeah, he shouldn't have run, and he should have. That's the other thing, is like, they don't trust their voters to pick the right candidate, right? So you go back several elections now, the Democrat Party poobahs have essentially picked the president, right? They picked Hillary. They told Bernie to go away, right? Then Hillary went 3-22 in her last 25 primaries. They picked Biden. They told two people who were ahead of him in fundraising and the polls to get out of the race, clear the field for him, right? Then they picked, when he stepped down, they picked Harris, right? Hey, no primary, no contest, no discussion. It's Harris, right? So that's 3 straight where they've said this is the right person, and they've lost.
Yeah, I mean, there was all that discussion about the super delegates and stuff like that. How it was,
they have 15 votes to your 1, right?
Right. I mean, you could go out and challenge someone and and win a lot of delegates, but they were not equally weighted. It was weighted towards the establishment candidate, whoever, as you say, the poobahs wanted, because the super delegates come in and they have much more power, than the ordinary delegates. So that it was we saw how exposed the Democrats were to controlling the selection process
Right.
for the presidential nomination. And then it got even worse. Once again, as you point out, we have Joe Biden dropping out, and rather than finding a way to nominate someone, they went ahead and just said, no, this is it. We're just moving on. She's the VP candidate. This is it. We're basically anointing her without going back to any of the delegates or anybody. Nope. No one voted for Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee of the Democrat Party, right?
Right.
That didn't happen. And that's one of the many mistakes that the Democrats made in this past election cycle was this, that they just totally went from one screw up to another, and they can't seem to figure this out and realize this. I mean, but we do see some Democrat criticism, right? I mean, I don't think James Carville is not happy with them. Senator Murphy, was critical along with some other Democrats. I mean, what did he? He said it was a mistake really for the Democrats to let Biden stay in the race. They probably should have done a better job. Something's different. Now, that's Monday morning.
That now.
Yeah, it's Monday morning quarterbacking. They weren't saying that then, right? They were all trying to rally behind Harris until she, proved to be a disaster on the campaign trail, and then lost pretty handily to Trump. So you have this, and then you have Jake Tapper. He goes on Megyn Kelly, and he admits that the conservative media was right about Biden's mental decline. Almost like, well, thank you, Jake, for telling us that now.
Yeah. How long have you known that? How long did you know that and refuse to say it? That would be a good question.
How many times in our in our history, recent history too, have we had this kind of mea culpa after the fact, right? It's like, oh yeah, no, actually
they quietly, years later on a lot of stuff, they quietly, you guys were probably right about that. Yeah, we were right about it, right?
I mean, even
called us liars and traitors and all that stuff. It's like now, it's like if you go look at X today, the left is all in on trashing Jake Tapper, right? Jake Tapper's been a hero to them for decades now, and they're all trashing him because he dares say something bad about Biden. And then the other theme is like, how much time are we going to spend talking about Biden, who's not president anymore, when we don't talk about Trump being senile? And it's like, well, we don't talk about Trump being senile because Trump's not senile. I mean, that's the main reason that doesn't come up.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a stark contrast between Biden and Trump on their mental acuity and abilities. And
I mean, it's like people age differently, right? Trump could very, very easily be the bumbling one, and Biden be sharp as a tack. That's not the cards we got dealt, right? The cards we got dealt were Trump is on the ball, and he's negotiating trade deals all over the world and flying around doing all this stuff and on his game, and gets interviewed multiple times a day by hostile reporters, right? And Biden never could even take questions. And if he did, they had to have the little index card with the little picture on it. That's Susie. Susie is going to ask this, and you're supposed to answer this, right? You don't ever see that on Trump. Trump handles that himself because he's not mentally infirm. And so it's like their whole thing is asking you to believe things that are transparently untrue. Like, why do you do that? Why don't you base your thing on truth?
Yeah, and it's so typical, particularly of liberals, that once someone that they love like Tapper, actually starts to speak some of the truth and admit that he was wrong and got the story wrong on a Democrat, and particularly a former president of the United States, that the liberals want to burn him at the stake. This
right.
It's like that's it. You're persona non grata. We're going to burn you in effigy or whatever, and hang it. We just we can't deal with this anymore because you can't speak truth like that at all. That's not
right.
that's
you've destroyed your party over Trump hate. You know,
Yeah.
you can't even raise concerns because
Yeah.
it's, you know, the impact that might have on Trump hate, right? Like,
Yeah.
quit hating. They're political opponents. If you want to beat them, you can't lose all your focus on hating them, right?
All right. I want you to give me your opinion about the new Pope. I guess he was somewhat of a surprise.
Yeah, my pastor, I asked my pastor about it, like at a Knights of Columbus meeting, so like all the brothers could hear the answer, right? And he's like, well, it's not like they call, hey, Father Dyer, what do you think of who should we make the Pope, right? He said, but I can tell you one thing, it will not be an American. So his one insight was not true, which I thought was pretty funny. I'll tell you what, I am really impressed so far. And I think that what is about to happen here, I think it is very good for the Catholic Church and the world in general, is that the standard of what it means to be a giving person is going to go up, right? I mean, what you could get away with right before is not going to be adequate anymore. And I think that's great. I think, you know, service is going to mean more, and I look forward to it. I think I look forward to the church being driven in more of a help others direction, right? And I think he doesn't really, you know, like, I don't think he's going to bug Americans who want to go to the Latin Mass and all that kind of stuff. I don't think he, you know, Pope Francis was kind of against that. I think Pope Leo does not really strongly feel one way or the other. If that floats your boat and gets you into the service mode, I think he's going to be fine with it. It doesn't look like he's going to change church teaching much on gays, gay marriage, abortion, you know, stuff like that. So, you know, I think there's a lot less there than the leftist media wants you to begin. If you go look at all these quotes, right? The other thing that's happening on X is they'll say Pope Leo said it, and they will put out some quote like woke is good. You know, why do people keep saying woke is bad? Woke is good. It means you care about people. And you go look up that quote. Did Leo say that? No, he did not. Right. So all kinds of like the leftists stick their stupid quotes on him and say that he said it. So anytime someone says Pope Leo said something, do your own research, because most of what's out there on the internet now is a lie. He didn't do that. He doesn't talk like that. He has a brother who is a hardcore Trumper. The Pope himself has, in Illinois, you do not register by party, but when you voted primaries, you either take a Republican or a Democrat ballot. And the Pope consistently requested Republican ballots. So at least in primaries, he was voting for Republican candidates. Maybe they were members of his parish or whatever, and just people he knew or whatever. But he did it on several occasions. So it's not impossible that the Pope at least was a Republican at some point.
And this a question just crossed my mind. I don't know if you know the answer to this. It's like, when the Pope, is selected, and they're obviously going to be living in the Vatican and everything like that. Do they become citizens of the Vatican in essence? I mean, how's their nationality in terms of citizenship? Is it, because isn't the Vatican considered its own little
It's
country?
a state. It's a nation. It has a representative at the UN. It's a recognized nation. It's named in the treaties that are only applied to nations.
Yeah.
So it's like Singapore. It's a city state.
Yeah.
And so the citizenship question, though, I don't think you lose your citizenship of the U.S. to be the head of the government of the Vatican.
He could be a dual citizen, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe the Pope,
right? Or maybe the Vatican doesn't. I can't imagine why they would require that the Pope be a citizen.
Yeah, no, it's just something that I just kind of curious as to how that works. I mean, so there are a lot of countries that have dual citizenship. You could do it that way. I mean, and the Pope doesn't know how long they'll serve as in that capacity, because it's just life expectancy basically.
Right.
So, and everything like that. Yeah, and I know you're very service oriented. That's why you're involved in Knights of Columbus, and our church does a lot of service and
Sure
pours out
does.
a lot of money into humanitarian aid all over the world.
Yeah,
So
sure does.
that's what that's what we should be doing, is giving to others and helping others in need. This is not
Right,
about
because let me tell you, here's the thing that people don't think about, and like this point has been raised by a lot of world events here lately, is if you want aid to go to the people who need the aid, you are far better off giving that money to churches than trying to do it through government, right? Because the government, like a lot of that USAID money, like it was 95% of the money went to the people who arranged all this, and only 5% went to the people who are hungry, right? So going through government means lots of payoffs and kickbacks. Going through your church, some churches have some overhead, and some are even excessive, right? But most churches, the people doing the thing are themselves really good people, and they're trying to deliver aid. So they're not going to waste money on themselves that they could spend on aid for others. So, I'm fired up for new increased commitment to service.
That's great. Yeah, I know that if I give money to my church for humanitarian aid, that most of that money, if not all of that money, will go to humanitarian aid, because our ministry is a lay ministry. There are church employees who are paid, but it's not a big workforce. I mean, they depend a lot upon voluntary workforce for doing a lot of things. So the overhead is pretty low to maximize the contribution to where it needs to go, the money where it needs to go. So those are things, that's what it is. Yeah, as you say, you give it to the government. Government's it's a bureaucracy with just too many fingers in it, and very little efficiency. So I agree. Church is the way to go. All right, I said we might have a short show, but I spent too much time talking about my travel, and so we now went kind of a little bit past. But why don't you wrap it up, Brian?
All right, let me look at these things on here. The big beautiful bill, what's going to happen there. Enough jawboning will occur, and a few little tweaks will get made, and he'll get it over the finish line. They have charged the House member from New Jersey with assault on the New Jersey ICE facility people. The mayor of Newark was also arrested in this incident, right? And the Trump's lawyer, Dina Habab, is now the acting U.S. attorney for New Jersey. And she called the mayor and said, let's talk about this. And I think he has to go by there and apologize to the people he did whatever he did to, right? And then he's done. We're not going to worry about charges, right? And they charged him on the spot. So they waited to charge this congresswoman because they told her, they were trying to do the same thing with her. Just go by and tell them you're sorry, for hitting them. We don't, you're allowed to visit, right? But you can't go in there and create a ruckus and hit people, right? And oh no, heck with you, man. So she's going to be arrested and she's going to go to trial for it. And I don't think that's a wrong thing. The Senate has passed no tax on tips. I'm not in love with that legislation. I guess all tax cuts are good in a sense, right? But why is that way of making a living tax-free, and what we and you do is not, right? I mean, what is blessed about that? Normie died. Norm, I saw like a bunch of, somebody did a nice cut yesterday of Norm going into the Cheers and them saying Norm, and all the things that happened, and all the stuff that happened. And this morning it came news that Jerry Connolly, who is my congressman here in Virginia 11, who succeeded my boss Tom Davis in that job, has died from esophageal cancer. He was the one who beat AOC running for ranking member on House Oversight Government Affairs Committee a few months ago when we started the new Congress. And so now they don't have a ranking member, but I assume they'll have another election, and she may not win that either.
All right. Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hope you missed us. Anyway, please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. And we will be back next week and have a great Memorial Day. So enjoy yourself. We got a long weekend coming up, and we'll be back with more news and whatnot next Wednesday. See you then.